Is Prince Harry offering the King an olive branch, or is there something else going on? What have the King and Catherine been doing together this week? What is Prince Andrew's strange new hobby? And is Meghan Markle trying to copy Princess Diana? Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential. I'm Jo Elvin, and this week my panel is the Daily Mail's royal editor Rebecca English and the Mail on Sunday's editor-at-large Charlotte Griffiths. Welcome to you both. Now, before we get into it, this is my weekly reminder to subscribe to our channel if you don't already. All you need to do is press that subscribe button on the Daily Mail Royals page and you'll never miss another episode. Now, at the time of recording today, we have 299,000 subscribers. Come on, help us get over that 300,000 mark, and also keep sharing the show with anyone you think might enjoy it. Right, that's the housekeeping done. Let's get into it. Rebecca English, the King and Catherine have been spotted in the same place. This is, not that usual. What can you tell us?
Well, obviously it's the annual summer break at Balmoral where all the family gather together, and as usual the family go to church on Sunday, known as Crathy Kirk, up in Scotland. And yes, they were seen arriving not in the same car, in separate cars, but they all went to church together on Sunday morning.
Okay.
So nice to see them all out and about.
And is that a significant thing, or?
Look, the fact that they're all up there together after the year that they've had, I think is fantastic. Yeah. And the fact that they're all happy to be seen in public, albeit, through the prism of a car windscreen. Yeah. But, they're with ordinary members of the public, ordinary worshippers go to this church every Sunday as well. Yeah. So I think it's as close to normality as you could hope for.
Lovely. Now, you might remember this time last year, it was Prince Andrew who drove with William and Catherine in the same car to that service. There was no sign of him this time, though.
Funny that, because I heard last summer that was never going to happen again.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was some, let's just say some of the logistics went slightly awry, and I'm not entirely sure Prince William was particularly happy seen arriving with him to church. So that has not happened again this year. But Andrew is up there with his family, so.
Do you think words were exchanged?
Through people, I'm sure they were.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be on William's bad side. I bet he is quite scary when he's got a temper on.
I think the whole Andrew situation is very difficult for the family because, he is still a member of their family, but I think, the look wasn't considered a good one.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, Charlotte, because Andrew is in a tight spot right now, and then the last thing he needs, another film coming out about him in a couple of weeks, and that Newsnight interview. Do you think that he's actively trying to keep a low profile?
I think he is trying to keep a low profile because he's trying to cling on to Royal Lodge, and the last thing he needs is another big round of newspaper articles and, a sort of Netflix series, although actually I think this one's Amazon, just dragging it all up again. And it is a reminder, and it gives ammunition to those that do want to take him out of Royal Lodge, that it's embarrassing to have a sort of disgraced member of the family in a really prominent building as part of the, royal estate. So I think he is laying low, but also I think he might be getting a little bit reclusive. I think he's finally got the message, because at the beginning of this drama, when he was sort of exiled from the royal family, they couldn't get him to keep a low profile. He kept wanting to be out, didn't he? And as the years have passed, I think he has suddenly gone, very low profile, to the point of maybe even being a bit of a recluse.
Well, maybe he's just realised that that's quite nice, actually, when you want for nothing and you don't have to do anything.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I think he can't do anything. That's the other thing. Right. I mean, what can he do? He can go horse riding. Apparently, he stays in watching flight videos at home. He's starting to show signs of being quite lonely and isolated.
You preempted, because there was news of this bizarre new hobby of Prince Andrew's. What's the story with this?
Well, it was a wonderful little vignette in a piece written by my colleague Richard Kay at the weekend, looking into this whole siege of Royal Lodge and where we are. And he said that he'd found out that Andrew has a new hobby. He has downloaded one of these flight apps that kind of, you can track flights globally around the world, but he's projecting it on one of the walls of his home.
So with an old school overhead projector?
Or something like that.
Amazing.
So he can watch it kind of real time as it goes on, which kind of suggests a man with not a lot going on with his social life, I would suggest.
That's niche, isn't it?
It's niche.
That is niche, yeah. That's like up there with train spotting.
Yeah.
Keeps him out of trouble.
Exactly.
But yeah, I wonder, there must be a word for that. Like, we've spoken before about Camilla's love of lighthouses having a word.
Princess Anne.
Philology.
Philology.
Yeah. My goodness. Okay, well, whatever makes the nights fly by for you, Prince Andrew. Now, Charlotte, to a spot of royal fashion now. We love our fashion on this show, and our friends at the Mail Online have spotted how the royal family seem to have a favourite collective handbag.
Yes, it's the Aspinall handbag. I think Catherine's favourite one is the Mayfair Midi. And they're quite classic, aren't they? They're those beautiful sort of square handbags. And I think they're quite useful for female members of the royal family because I think they communicate with their bags. You might know better than me, but, there used to be that old thing that if the Queen wanted somebody moved on, she'd move her handbag into the other hand. And, of course, it's useful to have your lipstick in and everything, but it's just a really classic accessory. And the Aspinall bag is just a beautiful, very English thing to have. And I think the price point is quite good for the royal family. It's not thousands and thousands of pounds, but it's definitely upmarket. A Mayfair Midi is about £550.
Oh, bargain.
I mean, it's cheap as chips. I've got 10.
Bargain. Get two.
But it's not like a Chanel £3,000 handbag that then they'd be accused of being too bling. And of course, it's a British brand, so I think they're thrilled that they've got this royal seal of approval.
Do you think that they are all inspired by each other, Rebecca? Do you think someone, say Beatrice said, "Oh, Catherine, that's a nice handbag. Well, I got it at Aspinall," and so they all just sort of go shopping that way?
I don't think they do, but I mean, handbags
disappointing.
As Charlotte says, part of, especially for female members of the royal family, it's part of the uniform. Don't forget, Queen Elizabeth had a Lorna bags that were well over £2,000 a pop, but she would have the same handbag for 40, 50 years, and she only varied the colour and the design ever so slightly, and it became really synonymous with her. When you think about the Queen, you think about the hats, the bold print outfits, and of course the handbag and shoes. I've noticed actually certain female members of the royal family kind of championing new brands, as well as Aspinall. There's Strathbury.
Yeah.
I think I've seen Queen Camilla carrying that, Duchess of Edinburgh, and the Princess of Wales. So
and there's de Melier is another one that they tend to like.
Exactly.
As well. Yeah.
So I haven't seen any of them carrying a Lorna bag, which I think is so synonymous with Queen Elizabeth. Perhaps they don't want to, and they're trying to find their own brands.
Lorna,
to champion.
though, that's to be dropped like a stone from the royal family.
I think they have a lot of, they have a big fan base in this country. But I think when you've got someone as iconic as Queen Elizabeth,
give it a few years. I bet you Catherine will wear them in the end.
We'll have to do a whole handbag royal special, I think, very soon. Well, speaking of inspiration and fashion, Claire Chisotti, who is from the Royals team online, pulled together the times when Meghan Markle seemed to be making an effort to echo the style choices of her late mother-in-law, Princess Diana. So we have, drumroll please, the mum jeans and white shirt made really famous by Diana, which Meghan was spotted wearing this summer going out to lunch in Santa Barbara. That day she was wearing the Cartier Française tank watch, which actually belonged to Diana. It is reported that following Diana's death, Prince William chose to keep the watch while Prince Harry wanted her engagement ring. But the brothers swapped when William decided to propose to then Kate Middleton. So then we have the strappy red Caroline Herrera dress, which Meghan wore to a gala dinner in New York a couple of years ago, which looks strikingly similar to a Catherine Walker one worn by Diana 25 years previously in Argentina. Finally, the figure-hugging white dress worn on tour by the two princesses. Diana's from Versace, Meghan's from Karen G. We'll put a link to that piece if you want to see even more of those fashion similarities. Now, Charlotte, I won't ask you who wore it best, but it is quite something, the striking similarities, isn't it? I mean, some would argue, white shirt and jeans. There's probably a photo of me looking like I've tried to dress like Princess Diana. What do you think the real story is?
Well, in that white shirt and mum jeans combo, she's also holding the Lady Dior handbag, which was famously renamed after Princess Diana, and she carries that a lot. So anyway, I took that cue and I took Claire's piece and I went down the biggest wormhole. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I know that there's 10,000 pictures of Diana and there's 10,000 pictures of Meghan, and you probably could match some things by coincidence. But I actually don't think so. I think she's been doing it all along, and I don't think she's even making a secret of it. I think there are times she definitely echoes Diana on purpose. And we know that in the early stages of her relationship with Harry, she encouraged Harry to think a lot about her mother and his mother, and she brought Diana up a lot in conversations, and I think she is referencing Diana. I think she's happy with the association.
Maybe, but I also think you can do similar picture research jobs on the Princess of Wales and Diana's old wardrobe. Isn't that not fair to say?
Yeah, you could do. And there are times when Catherine's worn polka dots and sort of 80s silhouettes, and everyone said it's just like Diana. But there is this one picture of Meghan where she's holding her arms like this, and she's wearing a white shirt and sunglasses down the middle, and she's in India doing charity work.
Not standing in a landmine field.
No, but it's exactly the same pose and picture of Diana in the landmine tour. So I just thought that was even the pose as well, and the Lady Dior handbag. I mean, call me a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, Charlotte.
Go down the wormhole.
Because see what you've been doing this week, haven't we?
Charlotte is a conspiracy theorist. Rebecca, what about the royal family themselves? How do you think those sorts of picture research jobs go down in the palace?
I don't think they're that fussed by them, to be honest. I mean, whether William might have a view privately about, the kind of what seems to be the obvious similarities in the way Meghan is dressing to their late mother, he might well have a view privately, but I think, knowing the people I know around them, I mean, as we see with Queen Camilla and Princess of Wales, they just like to look nice, and
you're ruining
they're not
my
really that fussed about what the other person, the
Yeah.
other person is doing. So no.
The other thing is, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. I mean, Diana was a style icon. Who wouldn't want to dress like Diana? Her daughters-in-law possibly should be dressing like her every once in a while. Why not?
Well, isn't it that sheep jumper she wore has had a massive resurgence in the last year?
From Generation Z.
Yeah.
The TikTok champions of Princess Diana's old style.
They have rediscovered her now.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's the thing. She is properly retro now.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like yesterday to you and me, but like to these kids, it's ancient history.
Yeah, it's depressing.
It's fascinating. Well, I'm sure you will let us know your thoughts on all of that in the comments below. Now, speaking of comments, here are some of the nearly 3,000 from last week's show. What did I miss? You go away on holiday. Now, there was a debate over the report that the late Queen Elizabeth had described President Trump at the time as rude. Lots of our viewers doubted it, like William Phillips, who says the Queen found former President Trump quite endearing. There you go. That's the last word. No, it isn't. On the other side was Drina, who wrote, Donald Trump was rude to the Queen. He walked in front of her while inspecting the troops' guards. On the subject of the siege of Royal Lodge, is that what we're calling it now? Brita Sturton-Gill has this question about its former inhabitant. Why on earth did the Queen Mother need such a large home on her own? That's quite a good question, Rebecca. Any thoughts?
It is, and it actually highlights quite a kind of sticky situation for the family because, of course, they're members of the royal family and their homes tend to be larger than and grander than kind of 99.9% of us. I mean, the one thing I would say is that homes on these big estates tend to be bigger. Obviously, Queen Elizabeth, the late Queen Mother, was Queen. She lived in Buckingham. She was the female resident of Buckingham Palace. So, funny enough, Royal Lodge would actually be seen as downsizing for her. They have to be within security cordons. There's a whole sort of reasons, but I think it's something the royal family are more aware of nowadays. This was obviously, many decades ago that she was living in, given that as a grace and favour home. I think we now see William and Kate. Admittedly, they have 3 properties. They have Amner Hall, they have Kensington Palace. But in Windsor, they've chosen to live in Adelaide Cottage, which is a 4-bedroomed home. And, for a family of 5, pretty modest by especially royal standards and probably by some normal standards as well. So I think it's something they're becoming more aware of in the future, nowadays, and I think this is something we will see more of in the future, how they manage the occupancy of royal residences better. Yeah,
but the bottom line is the Queen Mother was the Queen, so higher ranking than Prince Andrew, so therefore it's more justifiable.
Yeah, I would say so. It's a very good way of putting it.
Yes, okay, well then Voices Vary has some big questions after Harry and Meghan's trip to Colombia, asking how does a nearly completely unknown actor in the US become quote-unquote relevant on the global stage? she marries a prince who has disparaged his family for money. Neither individually nor as a couple are these people relevant on the global stage. I'm not sure that's not so much a question as quite a strident statement there. On that theme, Terry Trammell has this to say. You notice the president of Colombia didn't show up to meet Harry or Meghan. And many of you agreed with Richard Eden, who's on holiday this week, who last week said that at times Harry looked like a spare to his wife in Colombia. There's an irony. This is what Twigs had to say. Harry has gone from being the spare to being Meghan's spare. What a fool he's made of himself. Please keep those thoughts coming in. Goodness me, harsh. We'll pick up with our panel on that last comment. There were a few in a similar vein. Charlotte, it is an unfortunate irony, isn't it, that Harry is now being dubbed the spare to his wife by some as they go on these foreign trips to sort of mimic royal tours.
Yes, they do, and Meghan always goes front and centre, but she has done this right from the beginning of their relationship. She's always stepped out first and never really allowed herself to be in the background, and he, at the beginning, supported her with that. But I have to say, in Colombia, it felt like he looked a little irritated at times and didn't really like sort of taking the back seat as she, you know, she definitely takes centre stage wherever she goes, doesn't she? She sort of unveils herself in a room, and Harry follows behind.
Americans are just better at that. They just are better at going, here I am, especially when they're an actress. Yeah.
There was one moment where Meghan was translating into Spanish for him, and so they had to pass the microphones between each other, which is totally normal, but she did seem to sort of grab it from him. It was very unfortunate the way that he kind of, again, looked like he was just being trailing behind her as she snatched from him. It just wasn't a good look.
Is that your view, Rebecca?
Well, I think we said on the programme last week, didn't we, that he just... Sometimes, I mean, photographs are subjective. There are photographs in this video of them smiling and laughing. But a lot of the times, I think especially when he felt like the camera wasn't focused on him, I thought he looked a bit mutinous and a bit miserable, I have to say.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Well, sticking with Harry and the notion of being a spare, this week we got a bit of a major update on Harry's hugely controversial book.
We did, and we discussed this, I think, earlier on this year on the programme, that they hadn't brought out a paperback yet. And considering it had been such an international bestseller, and, you know, we're 18 months on, that we thought there might have been one by now. And I think at the time I said I'd contacted the publishers, and there was no news, which we found surprising. And we were mulling over whether he might have even not bothered to bring out one. But I think contractually he did, and is, you know, he's contractually has to bring out a book, and indeed it was announced this week that he was. What is fascinating is they made a point from the very get-go of saying this book would not be updated, and you would, I've spoken to people within publishing, you would expect an updated chapter given how successful it was
and how much has been going on,
and how much has been happening in the last year or so. And they've made a point of saying it's not. Richard Eden's also got a story today saying there are no planned interviews around it. So it's quite a soft launch of what should be a very big book. And I think there's a lot to read into that.
So no updated chapters, no promotional interviews. Charlotte, you have to wonder if the publishers are actually happy with that.
I think they'll be furious because this could have been a brilliant opportunity to make loads more cash, which of course is what publishers want to do. And for a long time was what Meghan and Harry wanted to do. So I'm really surprised.
I just don't understand how that's not put in place at contract stage. That would be part of the deal.
Well, maybe there was some wrangling going on because, as Rebecca rightly says, you would have expected the paperback to have come out a long time ago. So I do wonder whether there's been some pretty intense negotiations. And also, it's a great opportunity for Harry to say more. And previously, his pattern is he's always got more to say. And it's just so surprising that he's not taken this opportunity to say more negative things or anything, really.
Well, speaking of more, we have been led to believe from time to time, Rebecca, that there are more books in the works from Harry. Do we have any inkling of whether that's actually going to happen or what would be in said books?
Well, 100% that this was part of a 4-book deal. That was an exclusive I had a couple of years ago that initially they tried to deny, but then admitted it was part of a multi-book deal. So the big question mark is what happens from here in. But of course we've seen this over the last couple of years, haven't we? Particularly, I think Spotify is a very good example. There were big promises made, this is a big deal, we're going to do podcasts here, there and everywhere. And actually it wasn't really quite what everyone hoped it would be. And that deal came to naught in the end and they parted ways. So it makes you wonder whether something similar might happen here with the publishers.
Gosh, it's just like it's just this thing that rambles on when we don't really know exactly what it is that they do anymore. Is that unfair?
Yeah, and I think they're part of that. They're not, quite sure what they're doing anymore and what direction they're going to go in.
Oh dear. Well, Charlotte, Richard Eden might be on holiday this week, as I mentioned, but he has, God bless him, written a column from his Sun Lounger saying that Harry is increasingly desperate for a reconciliation with his father as well as with the wider royal family. But so is it fair to say that, Harry is wandering, if not in, then at least near to a sort of no man's land?
Harry is the very definition of stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I suppose you'd call that no man's land.
Who's the hard place?
Well, this is the thing. On the one hand, you've got a woman who's known as Tungsten because she's so steely, and on the other hand, you've got the King of England, and these are two big personalities he has to manage. And I just feel that he totally is stuck, and he has to find a way to get back to England, and he just doesn't seem to be able to do that. If that's what he wants, and the mood music is he is starting to want that, and he just can't get there because Meghan will not move back to the UK.
But also, Rebecca, there's this question of, before the message from the Sussexes has always been, we need an apology before we can become closer and heal with the royal family again. Has that changed, if anything?
Yeah, I don't know about the idea of him wanting a reconciliation. I'm not plumbed into what Harry's thinking is, but I do think it was very interesting that he made that transatlantic dash to see his father for just 30 minutes when it was announced that he had cancer, and I think there's a lot to read into there. As regards the apology, I think what this boils down to is the royal family have called his bluff. They haven't reacted to any of his demands or his threats, either publicly or privately. They pretty much ignored the fact that Spare had been published.
Yeah.
And I think we're probably all familiar with this, that it's almost like dealing with a toddler having a tantrum. It's like, don't listen, don't make a fuss, don't give in to it, just let it through, it'll blow over, and harmony will restore itself. And I think instead of fighting back, that's the approach they've taken with Harry. And I think this is probably, as we've seen this week, proving to be the right approach.
Well, there's also been a fascinating view from the former BBC royal correspondent Jenny Bond. She was in OK Magazine speaking this week saying that Meghan might find Harry's looking back and worrying about how he's fallen out with his family frustrating because she seems to be at ease with estrangement from her family. What do you make of that?
I actually agree with Jenny. Once that drawbridge comes down for Meghan Markle, it stays down, and she doesn't seem to have any trouble with just moving on, finding a new friendship circle, finding another new friendship circle. She moves on very quickly, and once she's not talking to you, she's not talking to you ever again. So I agree with Jenny on that, and unfortunately for Harry, he can't just never speak to his family again, the royal family of England, and it's his brother who's shared so much pain and hurt with him in the past. So it's much more difficult for him. And the other complicating and confusing thing for him, I think, is that Meghan at the beginning of their relationship encouraged him to look back, go over the old problems, which of course he did in Spare and in Oprah Winfrey. But now it's all about drawing a line and moving on and forgetting about the past and looking to the future. But that's quite a big leap for Harry because he's just spent years and years dredging over the past, very, very painful memories for him, including the death of his mother. So it's a bit of a switch, it's a bit of an about turn, I think.
You're painting a picture of a man who doesn't seem to have much agency over his own destiny.
Yeah, perhaps that's unfair. I think Harry himself admitted that it was when he met Meghan that he started to look into his past, and previously he hadn't. So whether she was just a catalyst, she was encouraging him for his own good, or whether just having a new wife made him decide to do it spontaneously. But yeah, he certainly changed tack at that time, and now he's changing again.
Just before we came on air to record this, there's a couple of articles popped up in US media claiming to be briefed by sources close to the Sussexes, particularly around Meghan. I think this is interesting because she's about to launch her own big business and professional developments in the next couple of months, and you can already start to see that kind of press.
American Riviera Orchard.
Yeah. And she's done an interview about a new handbag, brand that she's invested in, and you can see the very familiar pattern starting to build up. And one of those articles was saying she just wants peace now. She just wants peace. But again, this ignores the fact that if these reports are to be believed, and obviously we are dealing with anonymous sources here, but if that is the case, then there's a complete lack of understanding that sometimes when things are said and things are done, they can't be undone.
Yeah.
That's caused immeasurable hurt to people, and you can't just click your finger and say, well, we want peace now, everything should go back to how it was before. That's not life. Life doesn't happen like that.
It's interesting. So, Rebecca, there was news that William and Harry might be in New York at the same time next month, and that had everybody, like me and Charlotte, getting the popcorn ready. And then you had to go online and ruin it, didn't you? Tell us.
Well, I am meant to be on holiday this week, but I got really ratty about
She's
this.
Such a soldier. Look at her in that hot seat again.
Just because I saw so much speculation about it, and there is no big issue. William's Earthshot Prize Awards is holding an innovation summit in New York at the same time that Harry announced he's going to be there. But when they announced it back in kind of mid to late July, journalists such as myself asked the question, oh, well, does Prince of Wales plan to go out? And we were told very straight, no, he's not. I checked that this week. He that hasn't changed. He won't be out there, and there is no drama around it. He obviously made that decision before he even knew Harry would be going to be in New York at the same time. But let's not forget, and I feel like I sound like slightly a broken record on this. His wife, Princess of Wales, made very clear that her treatment and recovery would go on during the summer and into the autumn, and I suspect that's got a lot to do with it. And while he'll be very involved behind the scenes, I think his public focus is on the next Earthshot Prize Awards in Cape Town in November. It really is as simple as that.
I mean, it's like she's just keeping us sticking to the facts.
I know.
Where's the fun?
Where's my conspiracy theory in that?
So, Charlotte, I mean, even if they were there, the chances of any kind of reunion would have been off the table, wouldn't it?
I don't think they'd be going out for New York bagels together, sadly. But I was quite heartened by the Oasis reunion this week. Those two brothers have reunited after 14 years. And honestly, the first thing I thought was maybe in 14 years, Harry and William will be friends again. Who knows? You never know. But not yet, I don't think.
It's a very good point, although I think there's 400 million on the table or something, isn't there, for that?
Cynics might say that it's more than brotherly love that's sort of like been the catalyst with the Oasis reunion.
I'm a very positive person, what can I say? I'm optimistic for the future of those brothers.
Well, now, listen out, there's a little fanfare coming, I think. Maybe I'm psychic. Now, it's not the Princess Anne section of the show, but in honour of another unsung hero of the royal family, who I know that you wanted to have a big up to this week, Rebecca.
Duke of Gloucester. He was 80 on Monday, and I decided it was about time I used that birthday to just explore a little bit more about who is the Duke of Gloucester and how important he has been to the royal family, because I think people sometimes forget he was born Prince Richard. He was a grandson of King George V. He was actually fifth in line to the throne when he was born, which is...
I didn't know any of this. I didn't forget it.
And it's fine, and I don't think you're alone, which is why it's good to remind people. Fifth in line to the throne is the equivalent of Harry's position now. Two of his uncles became king, Edward VIII and King George VI. So he was a very senior member of the royal family. But he was also the spare. So he never expected to become a working royal. And so he actually, despite having what should have been a very prescriptive life, he opted out all of that. He went to Cambridge to study architecture, which is where he met his future wife, Brigitte, who was Danish and even though I hate the word, a commoner. I've spoken to so many friends who've never spoken before who told me when he was at Cambridge he bought this little house and turned it into a commune, and they put Chairman Mao and Che Guevara posters on the walls, and then he went off travelling around the world. When he came back, he was offered this grace and favour mansion, a Crown Estate property overlooking Regent's Park, and he said no, and he bought a little flat in Camden Town in North London, which was pretty run down then, and he could walk to work. So he really lived a quite revolutionary life in his own way. But then when he was 28, his life completely changed. His elder brother, Prince William, the heir to the Dukedom of Gloucester, was very tragically killed in a plane crash, and his life literally turned on a sixpence. But there was no whinging, no moaning, no groaning. He literally accepted that this was going to be his duty from now on, and became a real stalwart of the royal family. I mean, he's 80, he's still associated with like 150 charities and organisations, carries out almost 200 engagements a year. And I know how much the family love, rely and respect on him. And there's lots of little vignettes in the piece about, you know, Brigitte is the kind of love of his life, and how she's always trying to watch his weight, and he loves chocolate cake, but she always sends a message to jobs he's going to go on saying he can have an apple juice, but, you know, don't let him have any chocolate cake.
Oh,
and
it's like a toddler.
But apparently they love him so
cake.
much, they always try to sneak him a brownie.
Yeah.
I've just tried to build up a picture of the man he is, and why Queen Elizabeth, whose cousin he was, you know, so loved and trusted him, and that love and trust is also with King Charles. So the piece came out on Monday, but it's still online,
and we will link it in the comments below, so you will be able to read it.
It's got amazing, really heartening, positive reaction to it. So it shows you that sometimes people do want to read about these kind of unsung members of the royal family.
Like if you're into the royal family, that's an article you need to read, so check that out. Thank you, Rebecca. Now, William and Harry might not be meeting in New York, as we have established with buzzkill English here, but the royal family have many happy memories in the Big Apple, and here are just some of them. Some great memories there. A reminder that if you want more wonderful royal content, do press subscribe on the Daily Mail Royals YouTube channel. My thanks to Rebecca and Charlotte, and to you for watching. We will see you next week. Bye for now.